Well, hey, and welcome back to my channel, all about children's behaviour, mental health and well-being. In this week's video, we're going to be looking at tantrums. I'll be talking about what causes a child to have a tantrum, what to do when these tantrums happen, and I'll also be answering the question that I hear the most: when do tantrums stop? This video will be useful for you if you're currently living through or you're about to enter into that tantrum season, you know, that classic era of childhood. But even if your child is past the regular tantrums phase, the tips shared later on in this video will be useful for those less frequent meltdowns that still happen too. So let's start with what causes a tantrum. There's no set reason why a tantrum might happen. Yes, it's more likely to happen when a child is tired, but honestly, sometimes it's impossible to put our finger on the exact trigger. This is because children's brains are different to us. A young brain is focused on survival and it's focused on emotions, whereas our adult brains can cope with rational thought, regulating our own emotions and keeping our behaviour in check. So the first point I really want to make is that our children don't have tantrums because they're naughty or spoiled or rude. They happen because our children have some sort of unmet need and because they don't have the same access to the rational thinking skills that we have. Our bodies don't differentiate between stress. So stress can be being chased by a lion or someone cutting in front of us in the car, or for a child, an adult not letting them do what they want. When all of us are stressed, cortisol and adrenaline flood the body, meaning it's often not possible for our children to get over it or pull themselves together just because an adult has said so. In those moments, our children need connection, not criticism. And we'll come on to that connection thing a little bit later, but it's important to note that whilst we can support our children through them, tantrums are going to happen. And tantrums do not happen because your child wants to upset you. They happen because they're a child, because their brain is in survival mode rather than thinking mode. And not only is your child not trying to upset you, they couldn't be nice and pull themselves out of it even if they wanted to. And I've overheard the phrase, "Can you be nice to mummy please?" more than once, and it always sticks with me because it reminds me that we don't know what we don't know, and it's not any particular adult's fault. Generally speaking, we live in a society that isn't very understanding of tantrums and meltdowns, and therefore these adults genuinely feel like their children are being horrible to them on purpose, or that they're spoiled or naughty or rude. But that could not be further from the truth. Most children let out their biggest behaviour with the people they love the most. So if your child is having their worst tantrums for you, it's because you make them feel safe. So that's a big well done. So what do we do when they happen? During a tantrum, children need to know that big feelings are okay and they need to be helped to learn how to handle the situation. During a tantrum, children do not need massive lectures. They don't need to be ignored or to be punished. And if we want to support our children through a tantrum, the first thing we can do is accept that they happen, and then the second thing we can do is stay calm. And both of these things must happen before we can effectively coach our children through a situation. The accepting it part should be a little bit easier now we've talked about how tantrums aren't your fault as a parent and how they are just a part of childhood. They're a really common part of childhood, and the sooner we accept that, the easier parenting through those moments becomes. So say you're in the moment, a tantrum is happening and you're like, well, what do I do now? Be clear, be calm, be consistent. I'll explain. So be clear. There's a difference between saying to them, oh honey, it's very messy in here, so why don't we put everything away now so that nothing gets damaged, because you'll be very, very sad if your things get broken. There's a difference between saying that and saying, toys away, thank you. Now you might think, well, toys away, thank you is a bit blunt, or you might think, well, what's wrong with saying honey? Absolutely nothing. But let me put you in a toddler's mind. When they are busy playing, they don't hear our words in the way that we say them or mean them. Think about when you're focused on a task. Someone could be really kind to you, but you may not hear every single word that they're saying because you're focused elsewhere. So how would you feel if they then got frustrated with you? This is what happens so often with young children. And then the adult cannot understand why their child or their toddler won't listen, and the adult becomes frustrated, but to the child, this frustration comes from nowhere. The other thing to keep in mind with the example of tidying up is that to our children, it's not mess, it's fun. And our children are still learning about cause and effect, so they won't understand what you mean. Or they'll be tempted to try out what you're saying to see if it will get damaged. They want to learn what damage really means. So keep your language clear and try to only include the words that you need. This is why using a script like "toys away, thank you" is more effective. But what about if your child has heard and understood you and is already well on their way to a tantrum? If your child is in a tantrum already, being clear can sound like, "You're sad because it's tidy up time, I'm here for you." Being clear literally means using clear language and just not waffling on with more than we need to. "You're cross, it's home time, I understand." Sometimes our tantruming children won't hear us, they're too consumed by their rage. But sometimes they will be hearing you, even if it doesn't look like it. And by continuing to use that clear language, we're beginning to coach them through the tantrum. And by communicating with them in this way, we are making sure that we're not adding to the chaos or, fuel to the fire. As with everything I talk about on this channel and in my parent courses, in any situation, try putting yourself in your child's shoes. If you were upset and someone kept waffling on about your behaviour, would it be helping you to calm down? Everyone wants your child's tantrum to be over quickly, including your child. So to recap, the first thing to remember is to be clear. The second is to be calm. Just because you, as the person that your child loves the most, just because you've asked them to do something, it doesn't mean they actually will. That's just life. Just because you think that now is an appropriate time to do something, it doesn't mean that your child will agree. But that doesn't mean that we can always work to their timescales, and sometimes in life things just have to be done, and our children have to accept that. In these moments, try to stay calm, especially if you're expecting a bit of a backlash from them. A tantrum doesn't mean they're trying to upset you, so try not to take it personally. But just because they're screaming, it doesn't mean we need to give in or change our mind. Yes, it would be easier to say, "Okay, well, we'll stay for another 5 minutes," or "Yep, you can leave the toys out," but this runs the risk of our children learning that our boundaries don't actually mean anything. And again, put yourself in their position. If you were at a Taylor Swift concert, for example, and she'd finished her set, would she come back just because you threw yourself on the floor in a temper? No. Would you love her any less? Still no. We'd accept it. And it's our children's job to test the boundaries, and it's our job to help them to understand them, even when that's really hard for them, because in time, it will get easier. Now, there are going to be times where our children are just too far gone, and we have to let them calm down in their own time. We must still be clear and calm, but sometimes they won't want to be talked out of the situation or coached through the situation. They might just want to scream, and that is okay. In that situation, we just stay close, either by giving them physical support, like a gentle stroke, or just staying nearby to them, so you're there if they need you. Part of keeping them calm or helping them to find their calm is staying calm ourselves. Now, if this is something that you struggle with, and you are not alone, it really is one of the hardest parts of parenting. But luckily, it is something we can work on, and it's something I can help you with. So far we've talked about being clear and being calm. The final point to remember is being consistent. Before I go into this one, please note that I don't mean being rigid in our rules. We can be consistent with our children and be flexible and understanding. I'm not saying that you need to have rules for rules' sake. We have to be realistic, and our rules and the expectations of our children should always make sense. But if you have a rule, you need to be consistent with it. So if the rule is no jumping on the bed, then the rule is no jumping on the bed. If sometimes jumping on the bed is fine, the one time that you say it's not, there's likely, the chances are there's going to be an issue. You should expect your child to have a tantrum if the rule suddenly changes, or if there's not usually any consistency in you following through on that rule. There could be a backlash. So try to be consistent in your response to and support your child through the tantrum. For example, we don't jump on the bed as it's important that we stay safe. In advance, think about what your expectation is, and in an age appropriate way, explain this to your child. If you're going to soft play, what will happen when it's time to go home? Make sure that you're clear in your own mind first, and then explain to your child. You could say something like, we're going to do lots of playing, a soft play, then it'll be snack time and home time. Some children will really benefit from knowing what's coming. Others won't mind a change of plan. So, you know your child best, do what works, but please remember that all children need and they like consistency from their familiar adults. So when can we expect tantrums to stop? Much like when tantrums start, they can stop at any age. It's likely that tantrums will reduce once a child is more able to explain what they're thinking, but given the huge developments that their brains go through throughout childhood, we can't assume that tantrums will suddenly stop once a child is out of toddlerhood, once they're out of preschool. So many people ask me if their child is too old for a tantrum. So if you've been wondering this lately, I'd like you to think about how many adults you know that fly off the handle, like grown adults that can't control it. Tantrums are likely to continue if children are not given coping mechanisms or solutions, or if the adults around them aren't consistent. For example, if you have a 5-year-old screaming in a shop because they want something, is it because they're tired and perhaps overwhelmed after a busy day at school, or is it because their adult usually says no and then changes their mind to yes once their child starts screaming? There are going to be situations where we need to think really carefully about the individual child and the individual situation at hand. If your child is in the depths of tantrum season, or if they're dealing with some big emotions, then my mini module, Stop Being So Silly, would be perfect for you. This video masterclass covers what to do about tantrums, meltdowns and big feelings, whatever your child's age, and what we can do as adults to reduce the frequency and intensity of tantrums. I'll also teach you the real reason why toddlers throw themselves on the floor and why older children pull faces or stamp their feet. I've shared a link to that masterclass and a discount code in the description of this video. Also in the description you'll find other videos that you might like, as well as the links to some freebies that might be useful for you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. You can even hit the bell, and this way you won't miss any of the videos I share, because there's a new one every Friday. Please pop any questions at all in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Bye!